This is part 68 of my series on my Engage Model Railway project. Previous parts covered the project from its inception through the creation of the baseboard, selection and laying of track, building of scenic items, obtaining rolling stock, etc. The project is ongoing. This part deals with a whole bunch of British rolling stock that I picked up from a local vendor on Kijiji near me in Canada. On my layout, I model operations from the days of the Big Four, focusing most specifically on operations in the British Midlands during the 1930s, around the time my granddad was finishing his career with the LMS, having started with the Midland at the end of the 19th century. I live in Ontario, Canada, so I can't really expect to be able to buy much rolling stock locally. Mostly I have to buy from the UK and deal with shipping costs, duties and delays, since British Engage pre-nationalisation stock is not something normally found in Canada. However, recently I came across an ad on Kijiji, the electronic marketplace, offering a wide variety of stock for sale, and the ad specifically said that there was much British stuff. So I contacted the vendor, made an appointment, and drove for an hour and a half on a Sunday morning to see what they had. Frankly, I was amazed. I thought they'd have a few British things, and I'd likely buy anything they had that was within my prototype, but there was more stuff than I would have considered buying, although oddly skewed. The collection apparently belonged to the father of the lady I was dealing with. He had been collecting for many years and had now moved to a smaller place, so most of the collection needed to be sold. He was originally from Latvia, and he had collected railway stuff from all over the world: America, Britain, Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia. He did have lots of British Engage stuff, but not in any distribution you would normally buy for a layout. Basically, he had hundreds and hundreds of freight wagons from the steam era, boxes and boxes full of wagons, each still in its individual box, maybe 1,000 or more in all. But that was pretty much it. He only had a handful of passenger coaches and a couple of small locos in the British area. I didn't really look at all his stuff from other countries. Anyway, I went through all of the British Engage stuff piece by piece, something like 9 large moving boxes full, and I picked out what to buy based on my interests and how much money I had with me. I bought all of the pre-nationalisation passenger coaches available, because there weren't very many of those. I picked out a selection of the freight wagons based on their appeal to me and appropriateness to my prototype, going for something of a distribution across the Big Four companies, as even though I focus mainly on the LMS, I've taken to trying to represent all of the Big Four. There were only 7 locos, with 2 of those duplicated, so I bought 5 locos, leaving the 2 duplicates, and that didn't turn out too well, as we'll see. Still, at $50 each Canadian for the locos and $5 each for the wagons, it was definitely very worthwhile, even though I had to write off a couple of the locos as unfixable. In all, I picked up 84 coaches and wagons, plus the 5 locos and a few non-rolling stock items. Here's the box as I brought it home. It doesn't look all that much as Engage is so small, but it took me several weeks to get around to working through all of it, checking it out and testing it on the layout. Here are the few non-rolling stock items I picked up, not very much. Some spare wheels and buffers, a pack of cows, and a pack of loco crew. That left the rest of the file box all rolling stock in boxes. Or pretty much all in boxes anyway. I went through dividing it up in terms of how I might fit it into trains, and also with some consideration as to manufacturer. There was more Graham Farish than anything else, but quite a bit of Pico and some Minitrix and a couple of Dapol items. Here's the box down another layer with the oddly shaped packages taken off the top. As you can see, there were also a couple of Dapol items. I do like Dapol coaches and wagons, though I'm a bit more equivocal about their locomotives. Here's all there was in the way of passenger stock: 4-wheel coaches in Great Western, Southern, Somerset and Dorset Joint Railway and Caledonian livery, and 2 Caledonian bogie coaches. This is the Dapol stuff, plus a couple of Farish brake vans. Dapol gunpowder wagons in Northern British and London and South Western livery, and 3 siphon milk collection wagons. The siphons actually have BR markings, which I must admit I didn't notice when I picked them out. I don't really model British Railways, being focused on the 1930s. This layer shows more of the wagons, mainly Farish, and all of the locos. Top is a Farish GWR rail motor. That didn't work at all, really. These models, the Farish rail motors, were always very iffy, relying on driving two bogies via a complicated system of little plastic gears. I don't believe that they ever worked very well, so I probably should have known better to buy this. In the case of this one, the motor works okay, but the gear train is missing some pieces on one bogie, so that does nothing, and the other bogie will sometimes run for 1 or 2 revolutions of the wheels, but then the plastic gears always jam up. Also dead on arrival was the GWR pannier tank, third from the top right. That looks fine, but it does nothing at all, even when power is applied directly to the brush seating, so I imagine the motor armature must be burnt out. The other 3 locos worked, although one required some work to get it going on the layout. This was the loco that I was able to get working after some work. It's an old Lima 4F. These were never very good models. They have a rather low-grade motor in the tender and require a lot of power to run and are noisy and uneven runners. This one does look quite nice, although I'm not sure that the LMS would really have used a crimson livery for a freight engine such as this. I thought they mainly reserved the crimson livery for passenger locos, and this was always a freight loco. There was no linkage between the loco and the tender when I got it, so I've just fitted rapido couplings to them so they can be coupled together. All driving is from the tender. The loco is just passive and doesn't even have any pickups or anything. I also cleaned it and oiled it. It runs about as well as could be expected for one of these, I suppose. The other 2 locos ran okay as they came, although I did clean and oil them anyway. These were the 2 for which the vendor had duplicates, i.e. had 2 of each of these for some reason. In each case I took the one that looked to be in better condition. There were no original boxes for these. This is a saddle tank of wartime austerity type. This livery was apparently actually used by the National Coal Board, so it's really outside my prototype, dating from the late 1940s or 1950s. The name, sorry it's out of focus here, is Robert. And this is the other loco that ran okay as it came, albeit rather noisily and using a lot of power. It's an old Farish general-purpose tank engine in LMS Crimson livery. I don't know about these general-purpose tank engines. They don't seem to have been accurately modelled on anything, I don't think. But it looks quite close to a Ginty. Here are the Great Western 4-wheel coaches on the layout behind the Union Mill City of Truro. I've added a brake to the train, brake coach, but that didn't come with this Kijiji purchase. I had that before. Here's that train with the GWR 4-wheel coaches going under the viaduct and round by the woods. And down to another layer of Farish wagons. Beer wagons, tank wagons, and various open wagons. And no, maybe not a horse box there. There was a horse box, but it's not on that layer, I guess. And another layer. Various boxcars and open wagons. One more tank wagon. Bottom right is a Great Western tender with a couple of spare axles. I figured that was probably worth the $5 for the 5 axles and the couplings. Here's a slightly more in focus picture of the 2 working tank engines. Here are the 4-wheel Southern coaches behind a Union Mills T9 Greyhound loco. These coaches are all brakes, making rather an odd train. Here they are going round by the woods. There's something attractive about 4-wheel coaches. I guess the original owner thought so too, as he had more of these than he had bogie coaches. Here's that train going past the level crossing by the tunnel. An area of the layout that's been changing quite a bit recently. It's changed again since this. And under the viaduct. These coaches don't have corridors, of course, they're not connected. And finally that train pulled up in Colville Station. Here's a train made of a Caledonian railway stock. Of course, Caledonian was one of the constituent companies of the LMS at amalgamation. The train is being pulled by Union Mills LMS 2P loco. 2 of the bogie coaches and 1 of the 4-wheelers came from this Kijiji purchase. I had 1 of each previous to this purchase, and I've coupled them all up together in this train. Here's that train working its way round the layout and in Colville Station. Here's a train made up of all the available Southern Railways freight wagons, a couple of open wagons, a banana box, 2 general box cars, a cattle wagon and a brake van, pulled here by Union Mills Southern 700 class loco. Although my major focus is still the LMS, I can now field both passenger and freight trains from all of the big 4. Mind you, this little train is all I can do specifically for Southern Freight, although I could always mix in some private owner wagons with a Southern Freight train. Here's another oddity, my one and only Somerset and Dorset joint railway train. I had the loco, a Farish Midland 4P in SDJR livery, and 2 4-wheel coaches before. This Kijiji purchase just added 1 more SDJR 4-wheel coach. Here are the 3 Dapol siphons, 1 siphon G and 2 siphon H's with a GWR towed brake van. Behind the GWR pannier tank, not the one that came with this purchase. As I said, that didn't work at all. This is one I had before that I bought on eBay. Unfortunately, the siphons have BR markings, which makes them outside my prototype, really, although they would, of course, have originally been made for the GWR. Here's a train made up of all the LMS company wagons from this Kijiji purchase, some refrigerated cars, a cattle wagon, some general box cars, and 1 coal wagon. These wagons are from a mixture of makers and a mixture of ages, with the result that it's not that easy to keep them coupled together. The loco here is an older Farish Stania Black 5. And here are those same wagons behind the general-purpose tank engine that came with this purchase. And coming round by the scrapped-off goods depot past the Black 5 that was pulling them before, now parked in the scrapped-off goods siding. Here's an attempt I made to create a little Northeastern freight train behind a Union Mills D20 engine, ex-Lancashire and ex-Northeastern, I tell a lie, ex-Northeastern Class R, which became D20 in LNER. These wagons are again a mixture, some Farish, some Pico, and the Ilkeston waterboard wagon at the front is actually Minitrix. I had a devil of a job to get this train to run well. I put weighted loads into the wagons, lead shot, topped by coal for the open wagons and topped by sand in the closed wagons, and then fixed with scenic cement. The extra weight did help to make them run and stay coupled a bit better. I bought a selection of beer wagons from the Burton-on-Trent breweries, something which my family had a bit of a connection with. Here are all of the beer wagons from this purchase, behind the general-purpose tank loco with a brake van. And here that beer train is joined by the Northeastern train, now with 2 added Northeastern boxcars that I'd missed before. Those boxcars turned out to be perhaps the worst running wagons I've ever come across. They just hated to stay coupled to anything, even each other. Here's the beer train again, now joined by a train made up of tank wagons behind the Union Mills Web Goods engine. I picked up these 5 tank wagons, plus the 3 Dapol gunpowder wagons behind, which are in pre-amalgamation liveries. This train seems to run okay, which was just as well, as it's hard to add weight to tank wagons. Here are those 2 trains again, together by Bilston. Now here's another train made up of coal and coke wagons, appropriate to the Leicester area where I grew up. The loco is the Graham Farish Fowler 4F, a nice-looking engine, but not a great puller. Very light, even with bullfrog slat applied to the wheels, it could barely get this train up the gradient to the viaduct. Some of those wagons came with coat boards, and I had a bunch of these Pico coat boards that I'd picked up, so I figured I might as well add coat boards to more of the wagons. The Pico coat boards are in the nature of a kit. This is one set as they come on a sprue. They need to be cut off the sprue and then glued together using polystyrene cement. They were a little fiddly to glue up correctly. I glued the sides in 2 pairs first, like this, and then glued these 2 assemblies together once they'd set a bit. Here are 4 sets made up. Some of the rails were also broken as I got them, so I had to repair those as well. I also had some Pico plastic coal loads, and those fit into the assembled coat boards nicely. And here's one of those in a wagon. The wagon is actually Farish rather than Pico, and the coat boards are a hair too short, but I don't think it will be noticeable on the layout. And here's the train again. A couple of those wagons came with coat boards, and the rest have the boards and loads that I added. This is still a fairly lightweight train, as the loads are only thin plastic dummies, and I didn't add any lead weight or anything. Here's the last train I made up from this Kijiji purchase, basically a bunch of empty private owner wagons. That's a horse box at the back. I'm going to leave these wagons empty, I think. Railways often had to move private owner wagons empty, and I'm perhaps a bit too inclined to put loads in things. Here are those empty wagons going over the viaduct. The rather odd LMS brake van at the back came with a mixed lot from eBay, not with this Kijiji purchase. These were the last 2 wagons in the coal coat train that didn't have loads, so I did make loads for them using loose coal fixed with scenic cement. No lead in this case, as the train seemed to run well without needing extra weight. And there is the now fully loaded train heading off the other side of the viaduct. Now, running video of the passenger coaches from this purchase and of the southern wagons can be seen in part 62 of this series, where I was reviewing some Union Mills locos. I'll put a link to that running video in the description below. Now let's have a look at some running video of the rest of these acquisitions. This running video is all shot with the Olympus Tough camera. This is the Dapol siphons behind the pannier tank. I don't know why it's sometimes so dark in that corner. That's the GWR pannier tank with a siphon G and then 2 siphon H's and a GWR towed brake van there. Unfortunately, the siphons I didn't notice when I bought them. I should have thought. I just saw Dapol siphon. I thought that's nice there, but they're not actually in Great Western markings. As they would have been after nationalisation, the markings have been changed to BR markings. As I say, I don't know why the camera sometimes, when this camera does not always look this dark in this corner. It's just the way the camera sort of auto-adjusts itself. Sometimes it, maybe because it's getting the reflected light off the backdrop there, it's just decided to adjust itself very dark in that corner, unfortunately. Other times it's much clearer, same camera in the same corner. Anyway, so there's those 3 Dapol siphons. I don't think, I'd love to change them back to GWR, but I don't know whether I can, really. It'd be a bit fiddly to do. Okay, now here we've got a train of LMS wagons behind a Black 5. This is the older Farish Black 5, the one that's loco-driven. There was a later Black 5 from Farish that was tender-driven, and I actually have one of each. I had to repair, I bought both of them used, and I had to repair both of them before I could get them to run. They both had electrical problems. Nothing to do with this Kijiji purchase. Here's the Black 5 bringing that train of LMS wagons down by the corner from Colville Station. I'm going to come round now by the scrapped off goods yard. Bumping over the joins in the track. Quite a noisy motor on that loco as well. That's the, you can hear the it goes by the camera, you can really hear the noise of the motor of the train. On the other hand, you can barely hear from the corner here, you can barely hear the chuff from the sound box at all. I don't notice that so much because I hear it fine when I'm sitting by the control centre, but that's the downside, of course, of using a separate sound box. It's not coming from the actual logo. There we go, round by the corner again. And one last pass for that train of the Lms freight wagons by the scrap-toft goods yard there. This is the Northeastern freight train. These two Northeastern fish wagons, they're nice looking. This is a close-up of them here, but they were the most balky wagons to get to work I've ever had, I think. They look nice, and they've got metal wheels and everything, but they really hate to run evenly and stay coupled together. I've actually got the second fish wagon there is coupled to the Ilkeston waterboard open wagon, and I've actually got those tied together by a piece of thread. I actually used it because it just wouldn't stay coupled, so I tied a piece of thread across between the rapido couplings so they can't come uncoupled. But then I'm still relying on the actual rapido couplings to couple the two fish wagons together and to couple the front fish wagon to the loco, and those are very iffy couplings. I don't know, I think they're older Farish wagons, and they've got very large rapido couplings on them that just don't seem very comfortable. Well, they don't even join very well to each other. I was going to say they're not very comfortable joining to other rapido couplings, but they don't even stay coupled to each other very reliably. I don't think I've ever encountered wagons more difficult to keep coupled than those two. What else have we got here? Oh, the engine. That's a very nice engine, actually. I should really cover that engine itself separately. I bought that specifically because I wanted an LNER freight engine. I didn't have. I had a couple of LNER passenger engines, but I didn't have an LNER freight engine at all. So that's a Union Mills J39 in LNER black livery, a very common freight loco in the LNER, built for the LNER actually. That was not one they inherited from a pre-amalgamation company, not exactly. It had some connections with pre-amalgamation locos, but it was actually a design that was created and built by the LNER, but it was one of the most common freight engines on the LNER in the 30s. It's a J39, and I ordered it directly from Colin Hurd at Union Mills so that I would have something to pull a Northeastern freight train like this. And there that Northeastern freight train goes behind the Union Mills J39 for one final pass past the scrap-toft yard here. This is some running video of the beer train from the Kijiji purchase. Here you can see a couple of Bass Burton-on-Trent wagons by the freight crane near Scrap-toft. This train's being pulled by, what is it being pulled by? Oh, the Fairburn, Farish Fairburn tank. It runs with very little power and whatever. But it's not the smoothest run of the Fairburn tank. Of course, that didn't come with the Kijiji purchase. There's a bunch of wagons from the Kijiji purchase from Worthington and Bass. They're not all from the same manufacturer. I think some of them are Pico and some of them are Farish, but they seem to stay coupled together fairly well. The brake van on the back was added because you need a brake van. That didn't come with the Kijiji purchase. And here's that train coming round again by the Scrap-toft goods yard. My family had connections with one of the Burton-on-Trent breweries. I think one of my great aunts married into one of the brewery families. I mainly remember because I remember being told that she left some money to people in the family when she passed away, because of course this would have been a while ago. Here's that train coming down by the woods to the tunnel. Various new bits keep getting added. We've got some piles of wood there and a couple of little huts and things. sound is from the Kato sound box, although I perhaps should have turned the volume up a bit for these videos, because with the camera actually sitting on the board, you're almost getting more noise from the train running on the tracks and the board than you are from the sound box, because that's sitting over by the control area. Well, there you go, there's the Fairburn departing with the beer train for the last time, and then we'll move on to a different train. There's some real trains passing behind me as I make these commentaries here. This is the tank wagons and gunpowder wagons behind the Lima 4F. Now that's a very noisy engine, that Lima 4F, and it uses lots of power. I had to turn the power on my layout right up to run that engine, because it's an older engine and it wants a lot of power. It's also got stuck there. It didn't manage to pull the train up the gradient there. I got it a bit stuck going up the gradient. It's tender driven, that old Lima 4F. The wagons are some rather nice little tank wagons, an assortment of tank wagons of different markings. And then there's a couple of Daypol, 3 Daypol gunpowder wagons behind that, 2 in London and South Western livery. He's got stuck again there for some reason, I think. I'm not quite sure why. It's just not a very well-running engine, that Lima 4F. I don't think I've come across a couple of them and they don't often seem to run well. I had to do a bit of work to get this one hooked up to its tender and running at all, but it does sort of run, but quite pretty looking. So yeah, there's 2 London and South Western Railway gunpowder wagons there, and the other is, I think, one North British. Yes, but I've got them hooked up with an LMS brake van there. Okay, now we're waiting for the Coke coal train to come by. That's the Farish Fowler 4F pulling it. I'm trying to drive it slowly, but there's not a lot of weight to that engine, so it doesn't run, and it's no flywheel in it, so it doesn't run very smoothly. So we're trying to get it to crawl evenly. As you can see, I'm struggling with it. It either stops or goes too fast, but I was trying to get the wagons to go by slowly so you can get a good look at the wagons. This is by the viaduct under the Atlas footbridge. Now that train's going over the footbridge, but it's going over, unfortunately, so fast. You know, it's hard to make them run by slow enough that you can really see the wagons clearly. And here we are down by the woods. Now I've switched, and now it's being pulled by the Robert National Coal Board engine. That's really outside my prototype, of course, as I say, because it's a wartime pannier tank and in a livery used by the National Coal Board, which was founded towards the end of the 40s. So, of course, it wouldn't have existed in the 30s, which is really the main time on my prototype. But I wanted to just make some video including that saddle tank. Beg your pardon, it's a saddle tank, of course. I wanted to make some video including that, running video including that saddle tank, so I got it pulling that coal train here. It's a pretty little engine. It's unfortunate it's outside my prototype. It runs fairly decently, not terrifically, but fairly decently. It's got a little bit of weight. It's got a metal, but it's an older Farish model. It's got a metal body, so it runs not too badly, and it can pull this, reasonable sized train quite well and get it up the the gradient without a problem. These are the wagons that I added coke boards and loads to, quite a few of them. I did not put any lead in any of them, however, so it's not an extremely heavy train. There we go, once more under the viaduct, trying to get them by a little slowly so you can see them. Strange brake van on the back. That didn't come with this Kijiji purchase. It came with a bunch of oddments I picked up as a job lot on eBay. And once more with the Robert tank, saddle tank and the coal wagons over the viaduct. This is the last little train I made up with the empty private owner wagons behind the general purpose tank from Farish. They're a bit odd, those general purpose tanks. Yeah, that's all they ever labelled them as, and I'm not sure that they were modelled entirely specifically on any real tank engine. Similar to a Ginty, but not really identical to a Ginty. Maybe they were really modelled on something else. If someone knows, please tell me. They made them, I know, Farish made them in a number of liveries, basically with exactly the same model, just painted in different liveries. So there's those empty wagons going over the viaduct. That's a Sir George Widgeon horse box at the back in front of the rake van. Otherwise, the rest of the train are all sort of pretty much open, private owner wagons from various different owners, and another of those strange little LMS freight vans from the eBay lot on the back. It's a noisy engine, that general purpose. That's the whine of the motor on that you can hear as it goes by the camera. Chuff in as much as you can hear it is from the Cato sound box, but there's a lot of other noises in the foreground that make it harder to hear when you've got the camera on the board like this. You can hear it actually a bit better here, probably because the camera's sitting right above the sound box. And here's those empty wagons coming by for one last